Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Thank you for the little wait as we find that people join a little later than the time we advertise. So we still got people joining us now, actually. It's been a very good response to this seminar with over 200 people registering to attend, which is very exciting. As many of you know, this time of the year, we would have been doing our user day. In fact, last week it would have been our annual user day, where we have hundreds of you come to a day of presentations of Business Central and all things in the nav world. For obvious reasons, we weren't able to do it this year. We actually delayed it until March, but that's now looking unlikely. So we will be just skipping it and doing our user day in November 2021. We'll look forward to seeing you all then, I'm sure. This session today is about Business Central, the autumn update, Business Central 17. So it's not all things Business Central, because clearly there have been several versions of Business Central. We are intending to do other seminars in January, February, and March. One on a more general Business Central level for people that want to know everything about it, differentiating it from their versions of nav. One on upgrading, and one on art of the possible, ways of improving your own system with all the add-ons that we can get into your existing systems. We're asking you at the end of this to feedback which of those you're most interested in watching. So this session, we're not going to demonstrate every feature of the things we're talking about. It would take more time than is useful. We're going to explain, demonstrate those that are worth demonstrating, and explain with PowerPoint the other things that we're going to show you. We will be sending out this deck after the seminar, so you don't need to take copious notes. We'll be sending that out. And if you have any questions, would you put them in the questions part of the chat? Put them in the questions part of this seminar. We'll look at those. I'll select questions that we can answer that are on topic. If there are questions that are on a different topic, we will follow up afterwards. Questions that we can't answer, we'll also follow up with afterwards by email. But we certainly love to have your questions. So we'll be going through today the client improvements in the new Business Central, things that have changed since last time, functional improvements, some terminology changes, some quite significant changes around things like pricing, which have been frankly the same since as long as I can remember. Power Platform integration, some things about the technicality, the under the hood stuff, about the background technology. And then we're going to finish off with some niceties around the Microsoft Teams integration that we can now have within Business Central. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the session. Please put your questions in the chat or the questions part, and I will now hand over to Tom Bevan to take it from here. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks very much, Ian. Morning, guys. Hope you're all doing very well. As Ian said, we're not going to cover absolutely everything in Business Central in this session. We're going to kind of pick out a few of the feature improvements from this particular update. I'm going to kind of walk through a few of them to start with. And then once we've kind of done that, we're going to go into demo a few of them and then do a bit of a team session at the end. So the first bit we're going to go through is what's new in the web client. So as you know, Business Central is just a web client, so you probably should just say what's new in the client. What's kind of important to mention though is that Microsoft have driven a lot of what this is. It's kind of, we look at it as very much an incremental update. So they're coming out much more regularly, like every 6 months, as opposed to once every 2 years. So if you were to wrap up the last 4 sort of wave updates, you'd have quite a large update. But this is an incremental update. So we see lots of tweaks and lots of minor improvements that Microsoft are doing throughout the application. And these tweaks and upgrades, a lot of them are driven based upon people's ideas coming from the partner community and the customer community. So those of you that are already using Business Central, you notice that in the help section, there's a link to a website called BC Ideas. And BC Ideas is the place where Microsoft get all of the ideas from. This is the place where you upload your suggestions, things that you think don't work quite properly, things that you think work better. Microsoft takes these, they assess them on a daily and weekly basis to look at the ideas. And then as they get sort of some traction, they decide that's something we want to go and put into the product. So everything you'll see today has come from those suggestions. So if you're already using the application, I'd suggest very strongly you go in there and start posting ideas if there's something that bugs you or something you think would be a really nice feature. Okay, so straight into it. So we're going to rattle through a bunch of new features quite quickly. Then we'll do a little bit of a demo to show you kind of how they look and feel in the application, and then we'll kind of move through on that basis. So the first thing is page load times. Using a web application, you're loading up a web page in the browser, so you'd have to kind of load the page from scratch each time you're using it. So what Microsoft have done is they've taken on board the fact that they need to make it quicker. So what they've now done is, because of sort of new browser technologies, it's enabled them to sort of save the page layouts and the page structures in the cache of the browser itself. So what that means is when you open up the page, you get this kind of pulsating elements here, which kind of show you the data that's loading. So the key thing to remember is it's not loading the data, it's loading the structure of the page from cache, which means that the whole page just comes alive much more quickly, and you can start interacting with it and using it much quicker. What's important to note though is that works on newer browser technology. So if you're running old browsers like Internet Explorer, I don't know who still is, but if you're using older browser technologies, it won't work on those browsers. Things with fact boxes become much more responsive. So this is all part of the same caching technology, but they've also restructured the order within which things load. So what's now changed is it used to just try and load the entire page. Now fact boxes were very kind of heavy on processing, because fact boxes are drawing information from lots and lots of different places. They're calculating values based upon kind of like relevant text that's coming from the page itself, and also could be from third-party sources. So sometimes they can load slowly. So now what happens is the primary content of the page loads first, so you can actually start interacting with that primary content immediately. Then the content of the fact box pane is loaded. Then the fact boxes load in sequence as they go down, and it doesn't actually load the bottom ones that you can't see until you need to see them. So it speeds up the process, so it kind of loads those fact boxes as you scroll them into view. So it's a much quicker way of using the page. Okay, horizontal scrolling. Microsoft has some feedback that the scrolling animation was a bit jumpy and a bit jittery and wasn't perfect. So as part of making the experience more usable and more user-friendly, they've kind of revisited how this all works. So the horizontal scrolling and the way that pages are structured now is much nicer and easier to use. So everyone's used to dragging columns side to side in every application under the sun. So they've made it more visible so you can see what's going on. Freeze panes are more visible as well. The horizontal scrolling animation has been updated, and you can now use the scroller bar at the bottom to jump multiple columns ahead, or just clicking the button will take you one column at a time. So it's a much quicker way and a much nicer way of navigating through multiple horizontal lists. Okay, so next up is dialogues. Dialogues are kind of pages, things like nodal pages, wizards, dialog boxes, that kind of stuff. So they've tried to make these much cleaner and much nicer to use. So if you look at the old version, which is here in grey for like dramatic effect, you can see that it was kind of fairly clunky. So what they've done is they've tidied it all up quite a bit now. So they've centered all the dialogues smack in the middle of the screen. They've made the page captioning much easier to see. They've made some more consistently available actions to kind of do things with the page. So stretching it out to give you more space to work with, and opening and closing pages have been much more tidied and made more consistent. It's all part of Microsoft trying to make sure that the application is consistent with other Office 365 applications and consistent through the application itself. So it's a much tidier experience. So it's much neater and prettier. The next thing is lookups. So through telemetry and through user studies, Microsoft have noticed that people didn't always find the information they wanted to get to from dialogues as quickly as they might. So they've taken that on board and they've tidied up the way that dialogues work. So lookups work. So what used to be is you'd be presented with lots of information, menu information, approvals, inventory, attributes, all kinds of bits of information which you just don't really need. When you're in a lookup, the lookup is primarily there for you to find a record or add a new record. So they've really tidied that up now. So the emphasis is now just on finding stuff really quickly and to de-emphasizing all the rest of that stuff you don't need. However, you can still open it up and have that extra data visible if you wish as a user. Okay, so next up is navigation. So in old versions of Nav, those of you that have been using Nav for a long time, you'll notice the word navigate pops up in various different places, and it was there for particularly for good reasons. But when it moved into the web view, it was kind of a little bit incongruous on the basis that you had the word navigate in 3 different pages on some action menus. So you still have the word navigate, which is the standard navigate, which is the Shift F7, which will always be there. But there was a feature previous called navigate, which was to find related entries. So rather than calling it navigate, they've now called it find entries, which actually makes a lot of sense. Then there was another navigate, which they now moved as well. So that what was called navigate is now called related. So we can now go to related stuff, so related documents, related information, related dimensions, and get to things in a more kind of sensible way. Okay, limited accessibility screen sizes. So why this is relevant is in older versions of web applications, they were kind of very much single screen applications. You didn't use them in multiple windows. Microsoft have made it easier for us to have multiple windows open and dock them and make it so that as you move things larger and smaller, it makes sure it uses the screen real estate in the best possible way. But also then as you squash the page down, it moves things in such a way that makes sure everything is still accessible. So as and when you use the application, you could say, right, I've got a big Excel window open to do my budgets, but I still want to have my BC window open to the side as a docked view, which is kind of compressed, which allows me to get access to the stuff I want to find, but in a much, much easier to view way. So as you kind of look through it, they've kind of restructured things a little bit. So the notification actions kind of wrap quite neatly now. The navigation menu is linked as it sort of is squashed down now, so you can actually get to the role explorer from there as well. Functions that you don't need are hidden away, but also still accessible. So you can still get to things like the action menus and the system menus really, really quickly, even from a compressed, smaller size screen. Okay, installable tile. Now, why this is relevant is Microsoft, you've always been able to take a browser window and pin it as a shortcut to your desktop, which is fine. Microsoft have now made this kind of reachable in a more consistent way. So you can now, within the browser itself, click a little button and it will create you an installable tile, which is an installable or uninstallable application tile. And I'll kind of show you that later as well. So again, making the system much quicker to have access to the things you want to get to. This kind of reiterates my point before, as such of making it easier to load things in cache and make better use of browser technologies. That means they are end-of-lifing support for the legacy browsers. So basically, if you want to use Business Central, you're best running anything with Chromium. So anything, the new version of Edge, Chrome are by far the best browser to use because of the technology they run on. They're just much more advanced. Okay, so into some more kind of nice features. So one of the features we have now is this kind of ability to manage features, so feature management. So what this now does is it gives admins control as to when things are launched and released. So one of the bugbears people have of kind of SaaS technology is that a new feature comes out and it just gets foisted upon you without having a chance to test it, check it out, see what's going on, and functionality changes. And as you'll see through today, we have various different things which are new bits of functionality, which, things like the new sales pricing, things like the new email functionality, you're going to want to have a look at and play within your sandbox environment or play with it on a non-production environment before you kind of launch it out to the user base. So what this allows you to do is, as and when Microsoft make new features available, they put them into the feature management section, which allows admins to go in, have a look at them, test them, work out how things work, get some training stuff lined up, and then as they're ready to release it to the user base, they can go and enable it for all users as and when they want to do so. So it's kind of a nice way of making sure it puts admins in more control of how things get rolled out to the user base. They've also improved the space on complex pages. So this is kind of if you have customizations. A lot of times, if we have to put lots of data, lots of information onto a page, it wasn't always the best at utilizing to the best capability the screen real estate available. So what it's now done is that they've done it in such a way that allows developers much more control of how much screen real estate is used. So instead of having big blocks of white space lying around, the mins and maxes on the tables and matrices are much more visible now. So it's a much nicer way of using the system. Okay, next up, we're going to do a quick demo. So I'm going to show you a few of those features and how they look in the application itself. So we're going to jump into Edge. Now, I'm a very recent convert to Edge. I was always a Chrome person and always have done it and always used it. But Edge is now kind of probably the right browser to be using. If you're a person that uses Office 365, and I think something like 80–90% of our customers use Office 365, then Edge just works really nicely. So in the browser itself, I'm signed into Edge with my Office 365 account. So I'm Tom, the business manager here, and I've got it all branded up with my Nav People branding. What's also kind of cool is, because I'm in Edge as a browser, which is connected up to my Office 365, I can scroll down the page and I'm straight into my Office 365 app. So I'm here sitting in my Office applications. I can get access to things I want to get to really quickly. Also, Business Central's going to open really fast. So the first thing you notice is we have this little kind of spinny bar here. And what it's doing is it's loading up the page much, much more quickly. So it's gone straight into that browser session without having to do much faffing around at all. What's also kind of nice is that we always talk about BC being part and parcel of the Office 365 applications. And instead of now having to drive into the Dynamics 365 area, Business Central has its own tile. So it is now part and parcel of your Office 365 apps and is accessible as such in a much quicker way. So actually the page looks fairly similar, but what they've done is speeded things up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to look at is this kind of idea of an installable tile. So if you look up here inside the browser itself, you've got a little button that says Install Business Central. So if I click that, what that will go and do is it will install me BC, and it's literally done that already. So now it's opened it immediately. So if I just close that down and go to my tiles, I've now got a tile on my desktop for Business Central. I can open it up and it should pop open really quickly. As you can see, it's loaded up the structure of the page. You can still see where data's loading. That still takes a little bit longer, but instead of having to wait for the whole page to load up, it's loaded the actual structure really fast, and the data just pops up as and when I start using it. That's kind of nice. Okay, so we talked about how the structure of the pages works in terms of the sizes. So if I just jump into my item list for a second, and what we can do is, as I kind of look at this list page, if I just take it and resize it and I make this a smaller page size, what it's going to do is it's going to restructure the way the page layout is viewable. So what I've now got is I've got my list, which is still a list, but I could dot that to the side there. And I can have my Office 365 window here. So I'm still working on my business stuff here, but I've got a smaller window on the side. So as I dock it, you'll notice things change in terms of what's visible to me. So as I squash it down, it removes things I don't need to see, but it means everything is now still visible with this little bar here. So if I squash this right down to being a really small window, it's changed the structure of my header tables here. So I've still got access to my system stuff. I've still got access to my my menus, and everything is still now visible, but in a much more kind of compressed way. So I can still get access to stuff like this, processes, and everything's still visible on a sidebar, even if it's squashed down and small. So that's kind of nice. Okay, I mentioned about how lookups work. So if I go to create a new sales quote, and inside my sales quote screen, this will load up in kind of the normal way. So you can see the page structure loads up nice and quickly here. What I can do is if I go to my lookups, the lookups have changed in the way they look. So it's much cleaner. Now, I mentioned before, what they've done is they've made it so it's really geared around just finding data much more quickly. I can make the page wider if I want to, so I can see all the data available to me. I can chuck in here and start searching for the Canon. And it searches and filters really, really fast. Now, what I mentioned as well before is I can, if I want to, have access to everything else. So I can view as a menu, and that gives me everything else I'm used to seeing on there. I can see all the stuff I want to see, but realistically, it helps me get to the data, load the data from lookups really fast, and get to the things I want to get to nice and quickly. So the next thing is fact boxes. So I'm going to close my fact box down for a second, just whilst I open up these lists here. So if I start adding in an item, let's have an Athens desk in here. I'm going to say I want 10 of those. What you can see now is instead of having this kind of jumpy scrolling bar, the thing I can jump multiple at the same time. It's really smooth and much quicker than you'd expect. As I scroll through it, you can see it does one at a time, and it just jumps through at the right pace for me. So instead of being a clunky thing, I can now see my resizing is much clearer, more visible of how big something is. And then I can see my freeze pane nice and visible as well. Now, I mentioned about fact boxes and how fact boxes work. Now, as you can see, the fact box is all open, but it loads it up as it comes into view. Now, if I go and personalize and go and add a new component on here, let's say I want to go and include some more information on my fact boxes. Let's say I want to have I want customer details. Let's go and add that in and show that. Now, if I click done, that's finished. I'm going to hide my fact box pane, and I'm going to close this window down. As I come back into my sales quote list, and I come back and find that same sales quote, it's loaded up the structure of the page, and you can see it's bringing things through nice and quickly for me. It's loaded up that structure, and as I bring through my fact box pane, that loads up as I'm going through it. So as you can see, customer details loads as I need it. So the data loads as I need it, but nice and quickly. So the whole page structure is much quicker and it's a much zippier thing to use. So generally speaking, the whole thing, I mean, I've been using this for a little while now, and I can genuinely say that it feels a lot snappier and a lot zippier to use as opposed to the older versions of the web application. Okay. Next thing, we're going to look at some of the new functionality in the application itself. So in the app, there's 24 enhancements in this wave, some big, some small, and we'll kind of step through them as the session goes on. So for finance people, I quite like this one. In the old days, you used to have like test report. Then a few releases ago, they brought out that new functionality of preview posting, which allows you to kind of check what's going to be posted before you post it. So instead of the whole click, post, and hope routine, you can see what's going to happen. What this new feature does is it allows you to kind of see what's happening as it's going along. So it's doing background checking of the journals as you're doing it. So as you can see over here, I've got my issues, and so it's going to pick up any erroneous entries or things that don't make sense before you even have to go to preview posting. So I can see now I've got one of my lines is out of balance by £1. So it's giving me visibility of what's happening as I'm doing things on the fly, which is kind of a nice functionality. Next one is this copy journal function. You've always been able to do a copy journal function, but now you can copy posted journals. So why that's beneficial is if I've posted journals historically and I have to retype them all in again, it just allows a much quicker ability to enter data. You know, things that people do on a daily basis of entering lots of detail into Business Central, it just makes things quicker. And that's what they're trying to work on here, is speeding up user access. So we can choose what to copy, we can choose parameters, and then we can go reverse sign as well if you want to. Okay, package tracking. It's been in the application for a while, but it's only ever been on posted shipments. Now the package tracking functionality is available on other sales documents. So it's now available in posted sales invoices, posted sales credit memos, and posted receipts. So clicking the track package button will pop us into in this case, the DHL page, and go and track that individual package. So just again, allowing us to get access to customer information more quickly. Next one, longer item references. So for those of you that use like item references, probably most of you often use things like barcodes. They've extended the capability. It always used to be limited to 30 characters, which was, you know, plenty in the old days, but nowadays a lot of us trade online, and so if you're using GWIDs or long item references, it allows you to have a much longer item reference. So again, not a massive feature, but useful for people who it's useful for. Next one is Company Hub. So Company Hub is a nice function which allows us to access multiple companies from within the one application. So as a user, if I have business units that are across different databases and also different companies within this database, normally you have to sign out, sign back in, and go and find those different companies and do your work in those applications. What Company Hub allows you to do is view all of those companies across different environments, connected up by web services, and allows you to have environment links to those different environments and different databases and different companies. So what that then allows you to do is jump into the thing you want to get to quickly, but also if I've got user tasks, which are things that I need to be doing across multiple companies, all those user tasks are kind of are brought together in one view. So I know exactly what I've got to do across different companies, helping me kind of structure my workload better. In addition to that, that works quite nicely with our enhanced central data management, which is a nice synchronization tool to keep master data and certain bits of information in sync across multiple companies, which we're happy to show you on a demo at a later date. This is quite a nice one as well. VAT group reporting. For those of you that want it, you know what it is. If you have businesses with a shared VAT registration number, it allows kind of multiple companies to submit to like one organization which acts as a group representative. So the companies can share their VAT and then it gets submitted by one company on behalf of the group. So it's a much nicer process. By the way, that actually goes back to all supported versions now. That's not just this release, that goes back as far as now 2016. Okay, so that's a few of the nice new features in the application as you can see them now if you open up a trial. I'm going to hand over to Paul Cartwright now, who's going to walk you through some of the new and upcoming functionality that we think is kind of interesting to demo to.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, let me just switch over to me and I'll start sharing my screen. So there's a few other bits and pieces that we think are worth showing you that have been added to Business Central in the latest version, and some of the things that are coming in the next couple of releases ahead. So if we just jump to the first piece of functionality, so as Tom and he mentioned, sales prices have had a major overhaul. This comes as part of the 17.1 update, which is really great. So that should be around any time now. Fundamentally, they've rewritten prices from the ground up. This applies to both sales and purchase pricing. We'll have a look at it in a second, but important to note, despite being a different structure, Microsoft have kindly provided an automated upgrade. So as part of the feature management piece that Tom mentioned, where you control when features get released into your solution, sales prices and discounts is one of those. So you can decide when you want this to take effect. And when you do choose, it does a full upgrade of existing pricing structures and price lists and those things into the new formatting. It's worth noting, however, obviously from a Microsoft point of view, that assumes that you're using absolutely standard pricing. So if you've got some modifications around there, they'll need to be accommodated. The question of why they've done this, I mean, we probably think it's quite overdue, actually. They've made price lists much easier to manage. And also pricing has tended historically to be something that's been developed with custom code for different implementations. And that was often quite a messy, intricate affair. They've made that much simpler now, much easier to extend. So let's have a look at what they've done. If I jump into normal Business Central and search for a price list, you should see now that we've now got 4 different price lists for sales and purchase, and then sales job and purchase job. So this new price list structure supports both sales and purchasing and the whole jobs mechanisms as well. If we look at the price list, inside there we can see we've actually got, instead of a list of prices like we traditionally would have, where you've got the individual items and groups and those sorts of things, now we're faced with a list of price lists. So these really control who is receiving this price and when. So you can see here we've got a price list for all customers from the 21st to the 1st. So you can see it's currently in the status of active. It's talking about prices. It applies to all customers and it starts on this date. You can see again we can have end dates on our price list as well. So if we go down, we can see we've also got discount set up, a price list for discounts for large accounts. And you can see instead of applying to all customers this time, it applies to customer discount groups. If I just jump into our Christmas 2021, we can see a few of the options we get here. So obviously we've got the ability to say who this price list applies to. And again, it's very similar in structure, really under the hood, you'd say, to what is in Business Central and Nav, or has been historically. It's just been restructured to be more sensible. So we can see we can still do campaign prices, we can still do prices against price groups and discount groups or specific customers. We now have a status against price lists, which is really powerful. The idea that this, for example, this price list is a draft. It's not currently active. It won't take effect. So you can draft out your prices and turn them active at the point you want them to become live. And then obviously on top of that, starting and ending dates still take effect. So even if I made this active today, it still wouldn't start until the 1st of December. If we look at the lines, then we can see that I've got here a couple of items. So fairly straightforward, a couple of items where I'm applying a minimum quantity and a unit price as I would normally. And also on the same price list, I can specify a discount group. So all my clearance items, I'm going to give a discount of 25%. So all of this prices and discounts is maintained on one price list rather than split into separate areas of the system. And obviously, if it's in draft mode, I can still make changes to any fields I like. So that's the new structure. This is the same for purchases, for jobs and those sorts of things. In terms of how it's easier to manage and certainly easier to extend as a developer, what they've added is a thing called price calculation method. You can see here that out of the box, you get the standard price calculation method, which is lowest price, which is just the way that Microsoft's always done Business Central. It always hunts for the lowest price for this specific sales document or purchase document. But now we can go in and say, for this price calculation method, I could have written my own called highest price. We can see which implementation is being used, and we can specify exceptions. This is all about being able to control how you migrate to different pricing structures, and maybe you want to leave some customers behind because they got particular deals with you and those sorts of things. Now you can do all of that without writing reams of code. So it's much neater and much nicer. And that is sales prices. So that's available from 17.1, which is the update that's coming out pretty much now. So it isn't available in 17.0 at the moment. Next up, a topic close to my heart is the email experience in Business Central. Again, since forever in Nav and BC, we've been using a thing called SMTP mail. to send emails out. The problems with that were it really didn't support anything like multi-factor authentication, which is where I'm sure lots of you got this set up. In Office 365, for example, you need to sign into your email with both the password and authentication on your phone or those sorts of things. So they've added that support in the new version from Business Central. They've also improved compose functionality. What this means is really they've made it nicer to be able to write emails inside Business Central. And really the big deal here from our point of view, or one of the big deals, is they've allowed you to see sent mail in Business Central now. So any email that's sent from the system, from BC, you can see in a sent mailbox, much like you would from Outlook. Lastly, they've also added the support for multiple mail accounts. So now you can have different email accounts sending different types of documents in different scenarios. So you could say remittance devices come from one address, whereas quotes come from another. So again, let's jump into BC and have a quick look. If I look at email accounts, we should now see that I've got multiple mail accounts set up in this system. I've got various different ones for different areas. If I wanted to add a new email account, it's fairly straightforward. You can just click on new, and there's a nice new wizard for setting these things up with some privacy notices. But nicely, you can see here, there's 3 types of mail account that you can set up out of the box. We can still use SMTP mail, so the old style formats. We can use shared mailboxes, which is quite common. So if you've got groups or teams which have mailboxes in Office 365, you can use those to send emails. And obviously, you can also now say, I want to use the current user's email account. So whoever presses the send email button, it uses their mail account. And then once you've got your multiple mail accounts, if we go to email scenarios, we can see all the different scenarios that have been assigned to these different accounts. So I can go into one and say, well, we've got posted vendor remittance devices coming from our accounts payable address. Let me assign more scenarios. I'd like to assign, and you can see all the different scenarios, different types of documents. I'm going to send normal remittance devices from that same address. So we can assign different accounts to different types of document inside BC. And then what happens is if I go and let's say I want to send someone a copy of their invoice, I can go to my posted sales invoices as normal, use the same print send option and send by email. And this time I get the new compose functionality. So we get a bit more of what looks like a normal email client, like you get in Outlook. So I can see I can extend and send CCs and those sorts of things. I can see the email account it's coming from. And I can see here I've got the body of my email and I've got a full editor here. So I could say, I want to make that nice and bold. I want to highlight this in yellow or whatever horrible change I want to make to my document. And then finally at the bottom, the email, it's already attached my sales invoice because that's where I came from, but I could also attach many other files or documents to this if I want to. And then I simply send that email. Now this will send from that accounts payable, accounts receivable address, sorry. And if I look in my sent email list, I should now see there's my sales invoice. It came from the accounts receivable address. I can actually still go in, see all the horrible changes I made, see the attachments. I can even resend or edit and resend directly from within BC, which is really nice from an auditability point of view. You can see all the mails that were sent. So that's the new email experience. And again, it's available from BC 17.1, so it's just about to become available to public. On to a possibly less exciting topic, which is compliance. Microsoft have added some new features to Business Central for around compliance. There's 2 main features. One of them is this idea of monitoring key fields, which is a development we've done lots of times for customers. Fundamentally, this is sitting on top of the existing changelog functionality to identify when users are changing certain fields and then sending notifications. So we can set up in the system as many different fields as we like. So in this example, we've got the customer and vendor bank account details. And all I want to say is notify me when anyone changes any of these pieces of information. You can add more fields with a nice on bulk if you want, but you can set them up individually. So I can say which fields I'm interested in. You specify which account this should go to, who the administrator should go to, and where it will be sent from. And then that person or those people will receive an email like this, highlighting that in this company, there was a change made to this field. This was the change made. It was made by this user at this point in time. And there's even a click through to go to their effective permission screens inside Business Central to see why they had permission to make that change if you think they shouldn't. So it's a really nice, simple little add-on. but actually has a big effect. The second bit of compliance functionality is a thing called retention policies. And again, this is really, this is about clearing down data automatically. So not maintaining huge entries of data that you don't need anymore. This is important for two reasons. One is for GDPR, clearing out data that you don't need, especially if it's got customer identifiable information in there. And the second is purely for database size. You might not want 1 billion changelog entries eating up your SQL server. So you can see, you can set up multiple tables with their retention policies. And you can see here, it's fairly straightforward. I can specify the retention periods, so we can set up different time periods to keep data. And then if you drill through into a particular retention policy, you can see you get more options. On certain tables, such as changelog entries, you get the ability to specify filters. So I want to keep certain records longer than others. So it may be that I've got some sensitive data I want to clear out more quickly than non-sensitive data. So this happens automatically in the background. You turn it on and it just happens on a schedule off a job queue. It's worth noting, by the way, that out of the box, this retention policy is only supported on the following tables. I won't read them out, you can all read it for yourself. But there are certain standard tables, primarily log and entry tables, and obviously the new email outbox and sent mail, because you might want to keep all those forever. This is important because whilst we can, or a developer can add tables from extensions. So if you've had a new table added to your Business Central system, the developer of that extension can add it to the retention policies. They can't add other standard tables. So you can't use this to clear out posted sales invoices or customer records or those sorts of things. It's only those tables and other ones you've added to the system. Another big point of movement in the Business Central world has been around Power Platform integration. So for a while, we've been able to integrate from Power Platform to Business Central using web services, using connectors. But this had limitations. Primarily, it didn't integrate directly with the Common Data Service, or Dataverse as it's now known. So Microsoft have fixed that in the latest version. There's now a direct integration between the Common Data Service, Dataverse, and Business Central. And this uses the Business Central APIs, which means it doesn't sync data back and forth. It's just a live interaction between Power Platform and BC. So any change I make in either side will be reflected automatically. There's no data being moved. It's currently in preview, but let's have a quick look at what it does, because I think it's really interesting. So there is an app you install from AppSource called the Business Central Virtual Entity. This is in preview, as I said. We don't know when it's going to be finally released, but it kind of works at the moment. It's worth noting as well at the moment that the preview only works from what we've seen in SaaS. It looks like they'll make it work in on-prem as well, but at the moment the preview is SaaS only. When you install this, if I jump into Power Apps now, what you get in Power Apps is some extra tables. You get a configuration table to say which environment are you pointing at, which Business Central database, and also this available Business Central entity table. When I click on data, what this is doing is now looking at my Business Central system and reading all the APIs that come out of the box and any custom APIs I've added. And it's going to show me those in a list. Once we get that list loaded, it will show me that I've got various APIs available that I can load into the data set by ticking a flag. We basically just say, yes, I want to make that visible. So you can see here are all my APIs. Here's the customer table. So I've said, yes, I want to make that visible. The result of that is, if I now search for 365, I've now got a table inside the Power Platform called Customer, which has all the fields from my customer API inside BC, and it will then load the data directly. So this data is now being loaded directly from within Business Central. So if I go here, and let's say we change some of the information about our customer. So they're in Guildford. Yeah, it's fine. So I can do that in BC. If I now go back to my Power App and just refresh the data, you can see that's been updated automatically. And this is a big deal. The reason this is a big deal is because obviously this makes it much simpler to create the kind of Power Apps we've been creating previously using custom connectors. So for example, a simple Power App, as you've seen before, if I refresh this data now, you should see that this address will change, and I can drill through, and on my phone, I can start editing, changing data as I like. I can do what I like with it. However, we've been able to do this for a while, using custom connectors, and often custom connectors will be a better solution for this. But where it's really important is when it comes to model-driven applications. So these are the what would normally be called 365 customer engagement style applications, but are part of the Power Platform. So now, inside the Power Platform, I'm now seeing all my customers from Business Central. I can click on one of them to go and look at them, and I'm pulling more information. And I can even pull linked information. So I've also got synced my sales orders. So I can see my sales orders from Business Central. I can click on one of those, all inside the Power Platform, and I can now see the lines. And if I wanted to, I could even edit that line inside my Power App. So maybe they wanted 25 of these. And when I save this, my net amount should update because it's pushing that data to Business Central, updating it, and getting the result back. So any pricing, discounts, all those sort of things will be automatically applied because it's just really representing the APIs of Business Central. And this opens a huge amount of doors to mixing data from various different platforms into the Power Platform, including your BC data. So we think that's really exciting. If you don't have Business Central 17 and you want to do this sort of work, the other option is we have a product called Enhanced Sync. This works with any version of nav with web services. So that's really 2009 R2 and onwards. With this, we can sync data. So we do move the data. It doesn't just look at the APIs, but it works with Nav and Business Central, SharePoint, and the Common Data Service or Dataverse. So you can move data between all those things natively. So that's an option if you don't have the latest version. Okay, so those are some of the kind of frontline features. There's a few other features that are, we consider under the hood. This is really development tools and things in the engine of Business Central that have been improved in the latest versions. So this might get a bit techy. First, improved debugging. This is really important because for those of you on SaaS or looking to go SaaS, one of the limitations at the moment is that you can't debug production environments. That means if you've got an error in your live system, a developer can't connect and see what the code's doing behind the scenes. They'd have to replicate that error in a sandbox and debug it there to see what's actually happening. This is changing. They've introduced a new technology called snapshot debugging, which should be familiar to developers of other languages. This basically means we can connect to a session and debug it without interrupting the user, without slowing down the system. It just sits in the background and keeps monitoring what they're doing, and then it triggers on any errors or places you want to find out what's going on. I say this is for production environments. It's not yet released for that. It's still in preview, but it will be coming to SaaS production environments soon. If we step through it, basically, from a development point of view, you do some work. You set up in your development environment which system you're connecting to. You can specify which user or which session. And then you set the breakpoints as normal. You initialize the snapshot debugging, which is, again, you do it from the development side. The user then gets a warning when they log in, telling them they're being kind of snapshotted, just in case they need to know. And then they do their normal work. They trigger their errors. They do whatever they want. And the developer can then finish the debugging session. So once the errors occurred, the developer then goes and says, well, retrieve me all the logs. And they can then step through that captured code as if they're debugging the live system. They can go back and forth and see what happened. The other really nice thing about this is those are files. So if one developer finds a problem that they can't work out, they can send the debugging file to someone else who can also step through the code and see what's going on, which is great, especially for our support team. This is going to make a huge difference for SaaS. Next is the performance toolkits. Microsoft introduced the ability to define custom performance tests that you can load into Business Central and have it be run repeatedly. So you can write tests to do common scenarios, creating sales orders, creating purchase orders, creating warehouse picks, however complicated you want them to be. And then the tool inside Business Central means you can register these in a test suite and then tell it how many times you want it to run it, for how long. You can simulate multiple sessions running at the same time, doing different activities to test for locking and those sorts of things. And basically the system will just fire off all those sessions as if the users are doing those tasks and capture a bunch of data about performance, including both time taken and the effect on SQL, the number of SQL statements. You basically get a log with a load of data in it, which is really nice. And it's really important that you can identify different scenarios or steps in the process. So here we can see we're identifying how long it takes to enter the line on a sales order and the account number on a sales order to see if there's a difference. And then usually you throw it to Excel and you can do really nice and interesting performance statistics. This is really good for seeing how development over time is affecting performance. Last up in my really geeky performance stuff, it's a thing called partial records. if you've been working in BC or have a BC system, when you want to extend tables such as the customer table, we do that through an extension. Now that has an effect on performance that isn't positive. It actually makes SQL work harder to get some data. What they've introduced now is a thing called load fields or partial records, which means a developer can now choose to only load the bits of data they need when they're working in code. This is really important. This means we can massively improve the performance of bulk data work by saying, I don't need everything on every customer table. I just need these 3 fields to work on. This works automatically on reports, so we don't need to do anything there. They should see a significant performance boost, and anything you call via APIs, OData. So any web services should also get performance boost from this. All this comes together about, it's all great having these performance statistics and measurements, but the key thing is we need to be able to report and see the results of these things. And here, telemetry has been really improved in Business Central. So they're now integrating directly with Azure Monitor to allow us to capture metrics and logs and push it out to different places. So we can see, if you're not familiar with Azure Monitor, it's a service that really, as I said, allows you to capture loads of data from various different systems and then analyze it in tools like Insights, Application Insights inside the Azure portal or Power BI. And basically, there's a bunch of standard API metrics that are recorded, and developers can add their own with a line of code. This is then pushed through to a log inside Azure, which can be filtered, queried, a bit like SQL. It has loads of information about what the person was doing at the time, what client they were using, how long things took. And then you can push that data out either into your central monitoring dashboards inside Application Insights in Azure, or you can push it out to Power BI and do some really nice charting of performance across the system, across your whole estate. And this really improves visibility of what's going inside, not just Business Central, but all your applications across the business. So that's a big improvement. And those are some of the geeky things that I've added to the system. So I'm going to pass over back to Mr. Bevan to talk about our final topic today, which is Teams and the integration they've done to Teams.
Hello again. Thanks for that, Paul. So what we're going to do now is talk about how Microsoft have improved the way we work within Teams. So Teams has always been something which is, like this year more than ever, has been a huge thing. So I mean, we're so used to working within Teams day to day. So Microsoft have thought about this and thought about how we can kind of integrate the applications more tightly together. So what we've done is we're going to do a couple of little processes and show you how that works in the world. So we're going to be doing stuff inside of Business Central, but from Teams. So first thing is Ask Nora. So a lot of you have probably seen this before. So Ask Nora is the ability for us to kind of talk to the Business Central system from Teams. So I can ask Nora questions. So I can say, what's the sales of Canon? I'm logged in as Tom, who's the kind of the business manager who wants to know stuff about the business without necessarily sitting within the application the whole time. So I can ask Nora questions. She can go and tell me the answers and say, like, what are the sales figures of the Canon group? So she's going to return to me the sales figures of the Canon group, which is quite nice. I can say, who's the contact of Canon? Because I remember talking to these guys, but I don't know who they are. It's Andy Teal. I remember Andy Teal. I can't remember what did he look like. So I can ask the question of, what does Andy look like? And because we've got pictures and stuff stored inside of BC, we can go and get a picture of Andy Teal return. Yep, that's the guy I remember. I remember there's some big invoices outstanding. Have they been paid? So I can ask Nora, has this invoice been paid? And I can say, no, it hasn't been paid. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I get something to chase that up. So I'm going to remind my account management guys to chase that up. So I'm going to remind Megan to go and chase them tomorrow. So I've asked the system, that's going to told the system to go and create a user task for Megan to go chase the Canon group tomorrow. So she'll get a notification in her application to go and chase him up. But really I want to know who's the salesperson that's after the Canon group, because I want to know what's going on with them. So who's the sales guy? Oh, it's Alex, Alex W. So the natural thing is for us working remotely and working on Teams is to go and have a chat to the guy. So we're talking about the Canon group. So normally speaking, I could just go in and have a chat in the Teams, which is what a lot of us do. But if we're using Teams properly, we might as well use a team and go and chat inside the team itself. So I've got a team here called the Canon group. So I'm going to go and have a chat to Alex and say, hi, I'm going to at him so he gets a notification so he knows what's going on. So, hi, Alex, what's going on with these guys? So Alex, who's going to get a notification, or Alex, as you'll know him as Paul Cartwright, is going to be sitting there as Alex on another screen. And and he's going to tell me what's happening with this particular account and you know, what's happening with him. So normally he would kind of give me some information, tell me bits of information, but here Microsoft has now enabled embedded Business Central inside of Teams. So all he has to do is paste the link, and that takes me straight into a nice little view, a little highlighted tile here telling me information about the canning group. So yep, that's the guy I was speaking to earlier, Robert Towns. And so I can come and jump in here and have a look at this. Now, as it opens up, it gives me a little preview window. So it gives me a nice little window, which is just a web browser window with the canning group's customer card. So I can scroll down and see what's going on with this particular customer record. Other nice things you can do now in Business Central is we have Power BI embedded inside of Business Central now. So we can actually see information about what's happening over time. So I can now see sales figures over time of this particular customer and what's going on with it. So if Alex wanted to go and agree a new discount with him, I've got visibility and I can see what's going on. We then also have obviously things like our enhanced fact boxes, so we can see information about attachments and that kind of stuff. But I remember we're missing contracts for these guys, so I need to ask Alex what's going on with the contract. So have you sorted out the contracts yet? I could type that would be wonderful. There you go. So Alex has got some work to do. He's got to go and get the contract sorted out, get them agreed, and then get them against the customer record inside the system. So the nice thing about the way that Teams works with Business Central is we have an add-on, which is the attachments add-on. So all he has to do is upload the contract into the Teams chat. And what that's now done is that will actually archive it directly inside of Business Central. So if I was in BC itself, I can come and jump into this. I can come and see my attachments file here, and I can jump in and see if there's an attachments archived against it. So what that's going to go and do is going to pop it into the folder. So you can see that that's been uploaded. So I can see the contract there. Now, if I go and jump into Business Central and go and look at that particular record, let's go and jump in now quickly. What that will do is using the file attachments functionality, take that file that's attached inside of Teams and then make that available for visibility inside of Business Central itself. So if I come and jump into the customer record, I can see my attachments against the canning group. So I can see my attachments folder. I can see a new contract is attached. I can go and download a contract and I can go and see that's being downloaded. So it's giving us visibility inside of Teams without even leaving the application. And it just makes the way we kind of work between ourselves much, much slicker. What they've also done is they've done some nice functionality around, in older versions, around other ways of interacting within Office 365 better as well. So for example, things like edit in Excel. There is functionality where I can take any page, list or report and edit them directly in Excel. But then because they're editable in Excel, they become editable documents. So I can have a chat to one of my colleagues here, Megan, and say, what's going on with the cash flow forecast. So I've asked Megan to have a look at the cash flow. So if I jump into Megan's account, I can see a request there. So she's going to go and jump into her teams, and I have a team called Finance. And what I've got is I've got some Excel tabs here. So Megan's got this cash flow forecast worksheet. And this isn't just an Excel spreadsheet dropped into a Teams window. It's a live linked document. So this is actually linked directly inside of Business Central. So I can see now I've got this Dynamics tab. And if I then go and edit data in here, when it refreshes, I can go and edit files and data and then publish that back directly inside of Business Central. So I can go and publish that file back into BC. I can go and chat to my colleague and say, yep, that's all done. And what that's going to do is, because I'm chatting in context of this conversation, if I jump back into Tom's login, I can see I've got a notification. And I can see that anything's happened. She says, that's all done for you. And I can jump into there and I can go and see that record directly from here. So from my user, I can get to the things I want to get to and see what's going on as a user without having to be jumping into the application. So for management, it's quite nice to be able to get to the things I want to get to really quickly and easily without actually having to jump into the application itself. Okay, I think we've probably overrun slightly. So we're going to open up to do some questions now. So I don't know if Paul, you still your webcam showing as well. Ian, were you going to be question master?
Yes, I shall be question master. So we've only got a few questions. The first one is from Patrick Moore. Can you provide some detail on compatibility with Jet Excel reporting? I think it's a pretty straightforward question, but we should always balance these questions with, It depends whether your Business Central is on-prem or privately hosted versus software as a service. That's the first question. But either way, Jet in Excel, which we've used for many years, and many of our customers use, works on Business Central on either software as a service or on-prem and hosted versions of Business Central. The only slight difference with the software as a service version is you can only access it through web services, and then it can be a little bit slower than it would be if you're using the on-prem or privately hosted version, where they've got faster queries that they can take account of. So no problem with Jet reporting. Second question, I think, Tom, can the company hub support function features only available in a localized version if that is different to the user's localized version?
I can answer that one.
Okay, so, but was that you, Paul? Do you want to take that, Paul?
Yeah, I can tell. So the way the company hub works is it works over web services, and it basically just pulls some key information. So it's not pulling the whole of the system. It's really pulling the things that are generic across all localizations, balances out the GL, user tasks, those sort of things. And as such, there aren't really local things. There aren't localizations that would be outside of that. It doesn't pull a whole load of information that would be.
So the things it can pull are generic across all localized versions, and therefore it can pull them, but it's pulling things like user tasks and that sort of thing. It is worth saying, technologically, because it's using web services, technologically, we could pull other information, and one of the things that we're certainly looking at is to extend our panels and tiles so that we can pull information from other companies into our panels and tiles to give more generic visibility and make it easier for you to configure that visibility too and extend the company hub. And the final question from Linda McDonald is, do these updates happen automatically, or do we need to do something to update them? Linda, you work, I think, for Sense in Scotland and are hosted on our platform rather than software as a service. So the answer to that question is, if you are hosted in software as a service, as in hosted by Microsoft, these updates happen automatically. If you have your own version, as many of you do, and Sense you certainly do, it's hosted on our platform, and therefore there's a small piece of work that needs to update. I think you're currently on BC15 at Sense, so to move from that to BC17, it's not a significant, it's a small amount of work to move it to a different server. So you know, a couple of days probably of work. So I'll get somebody to get in touch with you to talk about that if that's of interest. Those are all the questions. Thank you. There was a thank you from Anil Sundar. Guys did a great job of getting pretty much to time. Thank you for that. I hope it was a useful session for all of you. Can I just ask that you will be receiving an email with a feedback form. Please help us with that feedback form. And could you also look at that and rate which of, or at least let us know which of the other sessions that we're looking to run in the next few months you'd be interested in attending, so we can gauge which order we might put them. Thank you all very much for your time today. Hope it's been useful. Have great days. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
Thanks very much.